Hello everyone. For today's training, I want to talk about our bet frequency and our bet sizings on paired boards. Something I've kind of noticed is that paired boards are ones that are very often misplayed in live settings, where players will often be betting like a very big sizing, like half pot or even the size of the pot, on the paired board when they clearly have a strong hand, or even when they have a quite marginal hand, like a King X here in this example. And so I think it's going to be quite an illuminating little exercise, not just to kind of do what we did on some of the previous ones of, seeing, okay, we bet this size with these hands and that size with these other hands, but just look at our overall frequencies just on a wide range of situations. So it's going to be a bit of a broader coverage for today, but something I think you guys are going to get a lot out of. So let's dive right in. As you might see from our image here, our first example is seeing the button versus the big blind. Now, a feature in GTO which I've discovered quite recently, which I really love a lot, is this one where you go to reports. Okay, I clicked it's gone back, but basically it's where we have strategy plus EV. You've got the ranges, the breakdown, and so forth. But if you go to the reports and the flops, it's really great for being able to understand what flops are going to be ones where you can just bet range and what ones you're not going to so much. And the nice thing is you can see it's not just for the paired boards, but actually for all the different types of boards. And again, if I click on this pairing here, it might actually just filter to, yeah, it's even seeing that when the board is kind of paired, yeah, that we're going to bet a similar frequency to when it's not paired when we're from the button, but we're going to be almost always using kind of this smaller sizing here in this spot rather than going for the, mix of some bigger sizes, as it were. But anyway, going to, actually, I should probably use some of these features actually in some other training video as well. Now I think about, so I kind of discovered it on the fly. But let's go back to the flops one, and yeah, you can kind of see it when you've got like two aces on the board. Like the equity is just going to be really, really high in that spot. Like big blind's obviously going to be just checking range. Like let's say if I go here, so that it shows the big blind strategy, you're kind of seeing that again. We're just checking nearly every flop unless it's like the a low card that kind of paired, like if the six paired or if let's say the yeah a card like the yeah, actually it seems to be the sixes specifically that seem to like to go for it, or if the five paired, yeah, like 7-5-5, 7-4-4. But yeah, those cards are like the low card kind of paired, like the six paired. Those are kind of the ones, yeah, where the big blind is going to have a little bit of a donking, but because in pretty much all the other flops, the going to just be pure checking, that's why I'm going to focus more on what the button strategy is going to be in these situations. And yeah, we'll see how the Trangero goes. Like I do have to get going to a live tournament a bit later today, but at the very least, we'll kind of like look at from button versus big blind in different situations and kind of take it from there. And yeah, I already talked about how like if it's like two ace X, like just because there's so much less ace X in the big blinds range and certainly not the nutted ace X, it means that you're just going to be doing a lot of betting for a small size. I mean, we can sort of see like triple boards are kind of a bit of an outlier. They really don't come up all that much, and you don't really need to study them too much, in my personal opinion. But yeah, looking at this, see like ace queen, queen, yeah, again like similar frequency, and going over like ace jack jack. I mean, let's go down quite a bit. Like, let's say we go to a range where, like, looking at it from the bottom, you kind of see that there are certain spots where we'll be doing a lot more checking. Like, say if it's ace 5-5, for example, or ace 4-4, then yeah, it kind of makes sense that those boards are doing a lot more checking, just because there's going to be a lot more fours in the big blinds range compared to the buttons range. Like, say if I change this flop and I make it, ace 4-4 rainbow as an example, I just kind of bring up just switch back home to the equities just so I can show you, why we're sort of mostly checking on those kind of paired boards. But if you look here, you can see that, the big blind has like 45% equity. But if you look at like the nut advantage, it's very similar between the big blind and the button in that sense. In fact, even argue the big blind maybe has a little bit more of a nut advantage in some respect, even though the button has the overall range advantage. So that's why you are just going to see a lot of checking in that spot. But going back to the reports for the flops, and I'll just bring it back to the button because I didn't realize you could actually show it for the button until like quite recently. But I got pretty excited about it. Yeah, I definitely want to show it to you guys. And yeah, again, you can see like on the king, like when you have the king pairing, like so the principle is when the high card pairs, you're going to be just betting a small frequency, like that 33% pot with a very large frequency, and when you have a yeah, when it's a lower card that's kind of pairing, then yeah, you're just gonna do more checking. Again, when we see like King Jack Jack, yeah, already we're starting to incorporate a few more checks as you kind of go, or let's say if we make it King 9 9 as the example, yeah, again you're sort of seeing well that's King 9 8 technically, let's move it a little bit. But yeah, see King 9 9, yeah, it's actually similar for the King Jack Jack. So if we sort of ask like what is kind of the threshold, let's say, pair that we start to just check a lot more. So King 8 8 kind of similar, King 7 7 will just scroll a little bit. We can see, yeah, if it's like the paired card is like a 7 or lower, we can kind of draw this heuristic that we will be doing quite a bit more checking in comparison there. And yeah, it's almost always using the small size when we do fire. And yeah, if we bring it out a little bit more, yeah, when you have like King 5 5, yeah, you see like you're actually checking like over 50% of hands when the card is that low, but like the sort of sevens and sixes, like especially the sixes, but kind of like yeah, 7 6 kind of the threshold where we start to like check, close to half of the hands in that sense. Now if we take yeah, like the paired queen, yeah, like queen queen deuce, yeah, again it makes sense we're going to be firing a lot on this one, like about yeah, a bit under 75% with the paired queen, because again, we just have a lot more queens in our range than they kind of do, like respectively. Like say if we put a flop of yeah, like queen, let's say queen queen four rainbow as an example. And again, if we just kind of look at the strategy and bring up the equity chart, then yeah, you can kind of see sort of how big the equity advantage you have. That yeah, well, okay, maybe it's not so much of a nut advantage. We do have the range advantage, and yeah, like when you sort of have like the nut advantage, it does allow you to sometimes bet a bit bigger. But when it's kind of close to an overall range advantage, it's where you'll sort of just bet small with a large chunk of your range in that sense. With yeah, kind of the king highs and some of the ace highs being more the hand sort of doing the checking back because you do have showdown value, quite decent showdown value actually with those hands. But yeah, moving sort of down the line a little bit, like yeah, queen 10 10 sort of makes sense, yeah, when it's sort of like a high card that's kind of pairing, you are going to be doing a lot of betting in those spots, and you can also look at the big blinds range. If I just go here, like you'll see that quite a few of the 10x hands would kind of like free bet, quite a few of the sort of like 6x hands kind of free betting as well. So you can also sort of look a little bit at their free betting range to see like what's left out of their calling range. And if they have like yeah, less 6x or let's say less 10x, you can kind of adapt that accordingly. But yeah, basically going to yeah, this spot here. Yeah, so basically, again, you're sort of noticing a similar kind of pattern forming with the paired boards. And the nice thing as well by doing it this way is also even if you say came just for the paired boards, like if you are curious how other flops play out, you also have the chance to kind of pause the video and sort of look at some of these other flops as well. So yeah, we're focusing on the paired ones for today, but it's also just a good training us in general for seeing how the button versus big blind situation plays out. Again, once you sort of start having two sets of sevens, we start to check quite a bit more compared to say having, two eights on the board. And once we, yeah, get to the point, like basically it's the threshold, like we sort of will check more than 25% if the paired card is less than a nine. And if it's less than a six, yeah, we just start to like check a little bit over 50% of our range in that spot. There's just going to be like a lot of mixing in that case. Obviously, in the live thing, you might adapt to like check more or to bet more depending on your opponent's tendency, of course. Like say if they're way over folding to the 33% pot bet, then yeah, you might decide to bet that with your range, but still you can adapt accordingly. But it's good to know what you're adapting from in a sense, so that your play is like objectively going to be quite good, as it were, so the opponent can't easily exploit you. And yeah, again, it's like very similar pattern. Like even just to look at the kind of the grid here, yeah, it's just very very similar. One thing that is kind of interesting, yeah, see is like 10 9 9, just like almost purely just betting. Like you kind of see that the hand's sort of between a jack and the sort of nine, like sort of like say queen jack 10 9. These sort of cards just hit really hard for the buttons range. Like if you look at the chart, you'll kind of see it when it is mostly low cards, like say on 8 8 6. Yeah, we're still betting a decent frequency when it's like the eight that's paired. As we can see here, like still betting like 80 to 85% with those sort of hands like 8 8 deuce, because again, but the big blind also doesn't have a lot of deuce X in their range, but relatively speaking. But yeah, once you get to a point where it's like an 8 6 6, well, they do have a lot of sixes in their range, so we do a lot more checking than other spots like 844, 833. Yeah, again, like just sort of, going more like about 50%. And then yeah, once you sort of have like the 7x in the range, yeah, you're just starting to check like 50% or more of the time. And if a board is like, yeah, let's say 655 for example, again, yeah, you can kind of see it's sort of interesting to see that actually like you actually will check a little bit less on 655 than you will on like King 55 is kind of an interesting point, but I mean, I guess it's because like we also have some of those suited connectors sort of in our range and sort of connect well with those kind of runouts. Whereas if we look at the big blinds range, as I accidentally clicked the wrong thing. Um, yeah, and if you look at their range, let me just bring up Strategy V. Like you can kind of see like a lot of their suited connectors, like 10-9 to 5-4 suit is almost purely raising. So that's kind of I think the reasoning why the sort of 655 run out is actually kind of not as not as bad as it might seem on a first glance, even though the difference is maybe not so massive. But that's basically the breakdown for this spot. Like yeah, if it's free deuce deuce again, just doing a whole lot of checking. Because they have a lot of hands kind of good showdown about like the king high, ace high, and so forth. Um, and if you do have like a hand like aces, on that sort of flop, these paired flops, you sort of don't really need a lot of protection because you have like the top over pair. Like you have, let's say, jacks, like an ace, king, or queen is a bit yuck in a way for that card. But yeah, if you have the aces or even kings, that's not as much of a problem, of course. But that's kind of the breakdown, with button versus big blind. Now, let's say we maybe take a slightly different situation. I'm going to kind of just focus on being versus the big blind, like even though it's not a complete analysis, it's just going to mean that that's going to be the player that's going to defend the most, like by significant margin. So just sort of focusing on really the situation is kind of the most practical. Well, let's just say we have a situation where the small blind does raise and the big blind calls, and okay, we're just going to take a random flop because we're just more interested in the reports anyway. But yeah, if you sort of look at the strategy for the small blind, like this one is kind of interesting because yeah, you're out of position, but as the raise, like you are going to do a decent chunk of C betting, and we're kind of seeing a similar pattern that the high cards we're generally going to bet more, like especially like when the ace pairs, those are the ones we're really going to bet at the highest frequency, which kind of makes sense when you're a pre-flop raiser, because if you look at the big blind sort of defending range again, yeah, you're seeing that some of their ace X, like their weakest ace X, like ace five suited, ace four suited, ace six off, ace three, ace two off are all kind of like mixing in some free bets here, along with of course the very strongest aces. So to say that there's just going to be a lot more ace X in the small blind sort of raising range, kind of relatively speaking. Even though it doesn't look like it so much here, there it's overall going to be a bit extra when you consider like how few other hands are really kind of raising like just the suited broadways and a mix of various kind of bluffs and semi bluffs from there. But yeah, going back to the flop, yeah, looking just at the what boards you're going to be kind of betting more. Yeah, if you've sort of got say let's find a paired one, like say if it's ace, ace queen queen for example. Yeah, kind of interested that even in those cases we're going to kind of be still checking some percentage of the time. And that's something I kind of glossed over. Like if you do have the paired board with the flush draw, it's kind of to see that with the flush draw, you're actually going to be leading out less here in the small blind as the pre-flop raiser, just because, yeah, the big blind will be defending with a very large number of suited hands, so that's kind of the logic there. They kind of have like a bit more flush draws in comparison. But yeah, moving through like some other parts of the range, like let's just say if we have like ace jack jack jack, similar kind of pattern. So I'm curious to see what kind of the threshold is for where let's say if it's like ace eight eight, we're still betting quite a bit. I'm just curious if the heuristics the same for like the big blind versus button or if it's a bit different. But yeah, it is actually a fairly similar heuristic where again we're going to be checking like not a full 50%, but like a decent chunk of the time when we do have like a card like seven or lower, or especially a six or lower. Like when the paired cuts, so yeah, it's just going to be checking like where it basically the heuristic is if there's no flush or if it's rainbow, you're kind of still bet 75% of the time as a C bet. But if there is the flush draw, it starts to go down to only 50% is the pattern we observe. And we can also see where that pattern kind of stays consistent with some of the other runouts. Like you can sometimes see, with king, if there isn't an ace specifically on the board, that just because quite a bit of our range is ace X, and yeah, we are doing a little bit more checking, say on the king, queen, queen. Say if we have king 10 10, yeah, again, we're just gradually checking just a tiny bit more on some of these as the cards get lower. Yeah, the point where like a king 9 9 kind of succeed it. Because I guess a lot of the big blinds frame rate will have a lot of 9x in it. It means that, and now it might have more checking, but it means that, yeah, if we're on a king 9 9 two tone, we're actually going to be checking pretty much 50%, which is kind of interesting in itself. But yeah, so with like the eights and yeah, the sort of paired sevens as well, yeah, we're kind of seeing that. Yeah, so with the eight sevens, kind of see there are some differences that sort of relate to the blockers most likely. But yeah, it's still a similar kind of pattern that, we bet more when it's rainbow, we check more when it's when it's a two-tone one. And if we take like an extreme example like King Deuce Deuce, yeah, kind of seeing again like that as the sort of paired low card gets lower, like the difference between how much we check and how much we bet is going to decrease a little bit, but not by a mass amount, like it's something like 60-50 here or such roughly. But yeah, looking like the Queen X, yeah, kind of seeing again a similar pattern. If it's like two high cards, yeah, you're just going to usually be firing it like quite a bit as such. Like if the Queen 10 10, for example. And again, with the lower cards, yeah, you're going to be doing a lot more checking from the small blind. And if we kind of look at the chart, yeah, we kind of see that as we get to like the two cards 10 or lower, that's kind of where we do start to have a bit more checking by comparison, like even 10-9-9 being a board that we will be checking like close to 50% of the time here. Similar story with 10-8-8, as it were. Like sort of the 9-8, sort of the weird case where sort of like kind of checking a little bit more on the 9x and the 8x. But given that's a not so common situation, like I don't think it's the most critical one to commit to memory, let's say. But yeah, you're kind of seeing like when it's like two cards like 10 or lower, and when it's like a 10-7-7, again, like that 7 being a threshold. Well, when it's a rainbow, yeah, we will be checking just a bit more than 50% of the range. We look at a hand like 10-5-5 again. We're actually going to be checking, yeah, just the majority on the, hang on, I might have looked the wrong one there. But yeah, on 10-5-5, yeah, okay, I was looking at 10-5-4 there. But yeah, on 10-5-5, yeah, you are still going to be going for it a decent chunk where, yeah, with the 10, just, yeah, it seems to be specifically like the cards like the 9, 7, and 6 that seem to hit really well with the big blind spinning range against the small blind 4x. And okay, these treaties are all at 100 big blinds as well. So we're only looking at one stack size, but we've kind of picked the deep one just because they may have a little bit more relevance perhaps for cash game players also. But yeah, basically like 9-7-7 already, you're kind of seeing like it's a majority check. Same with Leo, like hands like 8-7-7 now become, majority checking down, checking in the small blind. And yeah, like so we're kind of like seeing the pattern here, like even on something like 7-7-6 is now becoming a majority check. So that's kind of the key heuristic there. Like you're still going to be firing generally like at least, 40% of the time, absolute minimum on these paired boards, small blind versus big blind. And, the maximum's going to be, yeah, let's say on a board like, yeah, ace, ace, king, there we're being like 80%. Like that's, pretty much as good as it gets more or less for us, or something like ace, jack, jack around 80%. But yeah, we kind of have some good heuristics there that we check a bit more if there's a flush draw on the board and we bet a bit more if it's rainbow. And yeah, again, like sort of this point that yeah, high cards we generally bet a bit more, low cards paired we generally check a bit more. So that's the example with small blind versus big blind, and yeah, I feel like those kind of cover the cases fairly well. Like I think if we took say an extreme example, say under the gun racing and the big blind calling, like just to sort of see the other possible extreme, and okay, the flop we pick doesn't matter too much as long as we pick a flop as it were. But yeah, you can kind of see that, from the big blind again, just going to be checking virtually the whole range, especially when the undergun range is just so strong here. But yeah, when a big blind checks, yeah, looking at sort of the under the gun strategy, yeah, like it's sort of kind of similar, only that because the undergun range is a lot stronger, it means we are just going to be firing a lot more where, cards hands like, yeah, like ace, ace, king is, yeah, just going to be virtually, or it's just going to be virtually a range bet in this spot. You can say. Kind of interesting that actually, here the flush draws actually will bet more under the gun versus big blind, just because we are going to have a lot more suited hands, a lot less suited offsuit hands in our range. But yeah, if we take some hand like let's say ace, queen, queen, we kind of see already the frequency kind of going down about 75%, and that's probably speaking to how the big blind range is kind of different against an under the gun. That yeah, you're sort of like getting rid of a lot more of these sort of junky offsuit hands. Now way towards having a lot more suited hands. So yeah, if they have like the it's a decent chunk is like, 9x, 10x, this sort of thing. So going back to the reports with the flops as I just, take it to this point, yeah, you can kind of see, yeah, that, I mean, if you sort of looked at the EV as well, you kind of sort of then get a better understanding like why certain freaks are being used. But you kind of see, yeah, that like ace and jack, yeah, is actually going to be checking like a decent chunk of the time there. So sort of these different like sort of ace high boards, like when another card pairs it, yeah, you're going to see, not as much sort of betting, like maybe more like, yeah, 60, 70% depending on the card. But let's just say we take like ace 7 7 again, that seven just doesn't really hit the underguns range at all and hits the big blinds a lot. So that's why you are just going to be checking back a very large percent, like even like 30 to 35% of the range or so with the ace 7 7. If we take like an extremity like ace 5 5 or ace deuce deuce, yeah, you're kind of seeing a similar pattern. You're just going to be leading out with 30% of range, and again, you'll kind of almost always just that small size of 33% pot in this instance. So yeah, basically looking at it with like the king X to see how that kind of shifts it. Say if we have king jack, yeah, again, you're just going to be firing just a whole lot there. If you have, yeah, something like, let's say, king 9 9, you already can see that the frequency is going down to around 50%. So if we compare like king 10 10, we kind of see, yeah, the threshold is kind of like the jack X. So once it's not like a card like jack or higher that's pairing, in those cases, yeah, we're generally going to be doing like as much checking almost as betting in those kind of spots, as it were. Um, and yeah, it seems like that heuristic is kind of holding up in general. That yeah, the lower the card, the more we are generally checking it, with the exception of like cards like the threes and the deuces. Because with the threes and deuces, they don't really hit the big blinds range either, because they're folding nearly all of them except the suited ones. So it means that you sort of get to bet a lot more. But yeah, kind of like the low to middle cards are kind of relatively better for the big blind, is the pattern we see here. Again, Queen Jack is really going for it, but Queen 10 10 starting to mostly check, and yeah, kind of seeing that pattern, yeah, of like a lot of checks. Again, until you get around that 4x being kind of like the paired four being the threshold where you start to bet 50% or more. And we can just very quickly check to see if that pattern's kind of holding up, and we can see that, yeah, it is kind of holding up again, that once you get to like the 9x or lower, you start to like check like 50% or so of the hands or even more. So yeah, it's basically just the same pattern all the way around. Like I'm not gonna try like every single one because it's pretty much the same situation. Like say on 10 10 9 again, that's a board where even there you're still kind of like checking a decent frequency, and once it gets to like yeah, if you have like a paired 10, yeah, you're still like firing it more often than checking. But as soon as it gets to something like, let's say 10, let's just scroll a little bit. Once it gets like 10 8 8 though, then yeah, we start to see a little bit of the difference. Yeah, now back to 50%. And so it's just a kind of more or less just holds up pretty strongly, as we can see. Yeah, once it's a paired card is a 9 or a lower, or especially if it's an 8 or lower, we start to just check, yeah, the about 50% or more of the time. Kind of interesting to see it in the extreme examples like the free deuce deuce or the free deuce, that yeah, we're just basically going to be just betting like our entire range, just because that board has just completely missed the big blind the vast majority of time. Similar story of like 5 3 3. So it's kind of a good thing we went to the end just to sort of see the patterns. But yeah, once it gets to like a 5 5 4 or a 6 4 4, yeah, then you are start going to be a little bit more judicious in what hands you bet with. And 6 5 5, yeah, kind of looking like the threshold where yeah, are going to be just sort of mostly going to be checking. So yeah, that's all I want to share for this training video. I think that we can see some pretty valuable patterns that again we can sort of draw the heuristic of like remembering, what numbers basically, kind of fit in with what cards we are going to bet more, which ones we'll check more. And then, the big blind range does vary a little bit depending on, what position we raise or small blind button or under gun. So there's going to be some small differences. We can still draw a conclusion like, that the Broadway cards are generally going to be good ones to bet more on when the paired card is a Broadway. When the paired one is a lower card, we're generally, like, especially if it's a 7 or lower, especially, then we are going to usually be checking that 50% or more from virtually any of the positions that we saw there. And there are like there's some of these rare sort of fringe case like we just saw with undergun versus the big blind. Like if they have almost no twos or threes in their range, yeah, there's some case where we range bet it. But again, it's like a very oddly specific case, and I probably would focus more on the case of the card more often, like remembering like check 50% or more if the paired cards are 7 or less, bet a high frequency if the paired cards are 10 or higher. Those sort of heuristics will, I think, will be the more practical area to carry you yourself well in these paired board spots. So yeah, do like the video if you enjoyed it and got some value out of it. Also, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and comment below what was the heuristic we looked at here that kind of was a big aha for you, or something you're going to try applying in your next poker session. All right, that's all from me, and I'll see you in the next one.